Yeah, we're live on the YouTube.
All righty. Thank you so much. Welcome everybody to the House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee. We are here on Friday, March 14th, with colleagues from the Agency of Education, and we are continuing our journey as a new committee to educate ourselves about various state IT systems. So we're moving from agency and department to department. So we'll go around the table and introduce ourselves, including our committee assistant. And then we always like everybody who's in the room to say hello, and then we'll turn it over to you guys for the record. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
That's good. And I'm Scott Campbell. I'm from St. Johnsbury, Caledonia and Essex District.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Tomorrow, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southwood, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Sarah Torrey, Washington 2.
Bram Kleppner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Ross William, Wyndham 2.
Jack Locker, committee assistant.
I'm Cashel Higgins. I'm a junior at Harvard Union High School, and I'm a legislative intern here with Rep. Stevens from Monterey.
Great. For the record.
Good morning. I'm Zoe Saunders, Secretary of Education.
Ed Gates, Education Finance Manager at the Agency of Education.
Sean Cousineau, interim CFO at AOE.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
We have another team member on the call. Jen, if you can introduce yourself for the record.
You're muted.
I'm Jen Hicks. I'm the Division Director of the Data Management and Analysis Division at AOE.
Great. All right, thanks. So I understand you've provided written testimony, which is great. We always appreciate it. And we are here to learn today about a little bit of the history and the current status of e-finance and uniform chart of accounts and all that good stuff. I spent my first 2 terms on the Education Committee, so I've got a little bit of background, but yeah, great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. And the request for this presentation came at a very opportune time. This was very productive for us to take a step back as an agency and really reflect on lessons learned. I've shared in multiple venues that we have a priority to improve data collection, data reporting, and data analytics. Being able to strengthen our systems is a really key part of that process. So in today's presentations, we'll provide some of the history and also share the lessons learned that we think are really important for future planning, particularly as we're thinking about education reform more broadly, and really ensuring that we can achieve that balance of having the standardization for data quality while allowing for flexibility to the degree that makes sense within the field. And we'll kind of talk through how we have learned about the best approaches through our experience. So, I'll turn it over to Ted Gates, who will be leading our presentation.
Great.
Having technical difficulties joining the Zoom meeting. Should I just begin and hope that it comes on?
Are you going to share your screen?
Well, that's what I was trying to
And
do.
request permission to share his screen, so I think it'll just take.
And then Zoom crashed and it's trying to open again.
Okay.
Jack, can you bring it up? Or
It's
you...
probably worth waiting. Jack can't bring it up.
Okay.
I think we're
Well, we all have comments, right?
okay.
We do, but
Oh, but
if you
they
can,
don't.
Yeah.
No.
right. So if you can pull it up, that'd be great. It's worth waiting for, I think, if it's just going to take a sec.
I hope it just takes a second. It's spinning. Not hopeful.
And I think
It's odd because it appears that you are connected.
I was.
Jack
Did you
can't bring it
forward
up.
twice?
Committee assistants aren't allowed to do that, which I read.
Let me try mine.
Oh,
Sean's
Sean's trying this. Okay.
right.
Are you
Or
connected, Sean?
Jen?
there we go.
Maybe Jen will be. Thank you, Jen.
Is it you?
Thank you.
Jen? Oh, okay.
Excellent.
That's why she's a division
Yeah.
director.
Jen, wherever you are, I hope you can hear me. So just follow my lead and switch slides when I'm done with one slide.
I don't think this is me.
Oh.
It's me. I'm doing it.
All right. I mean,
Oh.
we'll jury rig it this time around, but
Yeah.
in general.
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Thank you for your patience. Technical difficulties. Okay. So you had requested to hear about the shared school district data management system known as SSDDMS. So I will talk about the history of the program and how it went and where we stand today. So, so before I begin, go to the glossary page. We should get our terms straight. Three main terms: an ERP system, an enterprise resource planning system is the software category that businesses use for accounting and HR. So e-finance is an ERP system. The Uniform Chart of Accounts, that I will call UCOA, is a common system of accounting codes that Vermont districts use with consistent definitions and understandings. The UCOA system is agnostic with respect to which ERP system that it actually uses. The Shared School District Data Management System, SSDDMS, was envisioned as a single statewide ERP system that Vermont school districts would use. E-Finance was the system that Vermont procured through a formal RFP process. So a quick history of the UCOA. It's pretty standard in most states, I think, and in the federal government that they use a common chart of accounts. So Vermont began talking about adopting a uniform chart of accounts in the early teens, as early as 2015. The benefits of a common chart of accounts are better consistency of data, comparability, timeliness, accuracy, and compliance to business rules. The stakeholders obviously involved were the legislature and the Agency of Education and the school district business managers and business offices, users of the system. Yes.
I just had a question before you move along. So the SSDDMS is only finance, payroll, accounting, human resources. That's different from student data.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, two different systems.
Okay, that's what I thought.
ERP versus SIS, Student Information System.
Okay.
One more slide forward, please. And just in case you wanted to see what the Uniform Chart of Account actually looks like, it's a string of numbers that represent those segments within the chart: the fund, location, level, program, revenue source, the function, and the account level, which is expenditure objects for expenditures or revenue codes for revenue streams.
Okay, just to pop back for 1 second to the UCOA definition. Just want to make sure.
Back one.
Back one.
Jen's.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm
Jen's-
trying to
I just
figure
wanted
out how to
go back
drive.
Sorry, we were moving fast. I just want to go back to the UCOA definition if we can. So, okay, well, so the Uniform Chart of Accounts is, so we've got the goal here, or the idea of a uniform chart of accounts, so that all districts are using the same codes, categories for the way they do their bookkeeping.
Yes.
Right, so I'm understanding that.
Yes.
Alrighty.
Forward, Ted?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes. So I would say that the adopting the Uniform Chart of Accounts kind of got us to the 1 yard line in terms of consistency and comparability and better quality of data. And using a common software platform was secondary to that goal. So here's a quick history of the SSDMS. Stakeholders, being the stakeholders identified earlier, including business managers, discussed the idea of SSDMS to facilitate the adoption and implementation of the Uniform Chart of Accounts, in addition to other potential benefits such as ease of reporting, sharing of best practices, or potentially cost savings. The Vermont Association of School Business Officials, VASBO, members voted to move forward with the SSDMS, and here's where it gets a little sticky. There was some understanding amongst VASBO members that district participation in SSDMS would be voluntary. The legislature adopted language making SSDMS mandatory for all districts in 2018.
And UCOA had already been formally adopted?
Yes, and there was a deadline for districts to adopt the UCOA, and I think that got pushed once or maybe twice.
Okay, so UCOA came first, that got adopted, but that deadline got pushed. And then following up, there was an understanding that now that we had UCOA in place, we were gonna now everybody adopt uniform software in order to match that.
Yeah, it's part of, they were gonna be able to hit both goals using the software we've chosen, because they could get on the uniform chart at the same time as they implemented the software. So,
Gotcha. So it was a little overlapping.
yes, yep,
Yeah, so just to clarify, so we do have a UCLA.
yes,
Yes,
yeah.
so that was originally part of adopting e-finance, but so
They were
kind of fell
parallel.
apart, but that,
Parallel.
we still went ahead with the.
Yes.
right.
Okay, okay, good, thanks.
So the state went through an RFP process and selected PowerSchool eFinance Plus from I would say, a narrow field of bidders. There was a charter document for the SFDMS, and within the charter, there was three main goals or purposes of SFDMS. Central management of the chart of accounts would improve data quality and comparability. Management of the uniform chart of accounts from the Agency of Education and the business rules would reduce resources needed to monitor state compliance and collect data. And a single common system potentially would save taxpayer dollars by leveraging economies of scale. Quick page with some of the legislation that was involved in SSDDMS. It was originally mandated in 2018. There was 2 or 3 extensions as things kind of went sideways a little bit. And then finally in 2023, the legislature ended mandatory implementation and made it voluntary, basically.
Yeah, Rep. Semelia.
So I just want to ask a question. So, and I have been engaged on this issue on the uniform chart of accounts for more than a decade, trying to get that information, data brought forward to 2 decades now. One of the things that I'm not seeing here, and I'm wondering, I'm just curious about, is the need to have that data reported consistently in the state to be able to compare across districts for financial reasons.
Well, that was the goal and purpose of the uniform chart of accounts. It does most of the heavy lifting in terms of getting us to a point where we can compare data across districts if they're all using, if we can look at their expenditures and revenues using the same set of codes.
I think it'd be helpful also, Sean, you can expand on some of the work that we've done over the last year with the data validation and ensuring that there's really clear training around which codes to use. I know there were particular areas, I think particularly related to tuitioning and some other areas where we really did a deeper dive in working with business managers and ensuring that things were coded properly and providing that additional guidance. So if you could share a little bit about that experience and some of the work that we're doing to provide greater clarity in areas where we may still see some variability.
Yeah, as we collect the data, oftentimes we'll see, some districts' numbers are way off in a certain category, and we can work with them to recollect the data to get the information more compliant with the chart. And that's been ongoing since we started collecting the uniform chart of accounts in FY20. And each year, I think it starts getting better and better as we identify areas that are maybe coded inconsistently across the state, and we'll slowly get them coding things the same way. And and we've really dug into the data this year and worked even more with the field to get the data more consistent.
How does it become apparent to you? Like, how is that something that you catch, that something's coded incorrectly at the agency?
Just comparing, like maybe salaries or benefits are a lot higher in one district than another. If one thing we've seen occasionally is like a special ed cost maybe dipped really low one year and came back up the next year. So there's something wrong here, most likely in the coding. So, so if we see that, because we're compiling this data, cleaning it, getting it ready to report to the US Ed department. So as we do that process, we want to report the best data we can. So if we see those inconsistencies, we'll work in the field to correct it.
And I think
Rep.
your
Campbell?
question.
Oh, sorry.
is
Go ahead.
really around how are we systematizing that work? And so part of what we have been really clear around as an agency is enhancing the data validation process and ensuring that there is that accountability. So some of that is being able to do additional analysis and reporting that back out to the field. If the data that we're receiving is inaccurate, that's going to impact our ability to do more productive analysis. So I think what we've established is a greater feedback loop with the field. So as we're ingesting the data, that's not just reporting it out to the federal government, but reporting it back out to the field to inform planning. And through that process, we've identified that we need that extra data validation to ensure those consistencies. So as Sean's describing, we see those discrepancies, we're able to call that out. And we've had really productive partnerships with some key business managers throughout this past year, helping us to diagnose what some of those challenges have been, and then providing that training to the field and ensuring greater accuracy. So I just wanted to note that we do also see that as a systemic problem that we're working to address very consistently in coordination with our business managers.
Just my last question. So with all of that, so this SSDMS, the system that's been not abandoned, it's only partially being utilized.
It's voluntary, so we'll
Voluntary
talk about the
utilization.
participation.
Next slide. Yeah.
Well, how about that?
Rep Campbell? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. And then
Just-
software.
I'm just wondering what software you use for compiling and reporting the data to the feds.
We use the Microsoft Office SharePoint system to bring into the folders, and then I use Excel heavily, and then we also store the data on a SQL database, and then we report sometimes using a system called Power BI, which is a newer tool.
Basically, it's just
Whatever works.
office stuff.
Yeah, whatever
So
works.
it's a spreadsheet and
Yeah.
then fancy spreadsheet tools as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Rep Southworth?
Thank you. I heard from one of the schools in the area that I represent, one code in particular always gave them a problem. And said it captured all types of expenses and facilities for the reporting process. But apparently there were only certain types of costs that it would capture. And it's code 82 million. And if that means anything to you, it doesn't to me at this point. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on why it would only capture some of the costs that are being inputted?
Some within their district or statewide?
Yeah, within the district.
That code seems to be,
And that was the code provided by the state to them.
yeah,
Are they on e-finance?
At this point, I think they are not,
right.
but they had been. They had been.
Okay, so there's only two that we know of that. I think this code is a set aside code for a federal requirement. So I don't know why they're thinking it's not capturing everything. Are they not able to use it on every transaction or?
Yeah, they didn't elaborate that much. Said that
You have-
e-finance, you can only capture certain types of costs, is what they said.
Yeah, e-finance does have an issue with one of the segments of the UCOA. So in this particular case, we use a different segment to capture the set aside. So it's unfortunate, but
And they can contact me if they want to follow up with that.
yeah.
Could you explain the process when that occurs, if they're not able to appropriately capture what is in the e-finance system? What's the process to working with our team to addressing that?
Yeah, so we have a handbook to committee, so it's a UCOA committee with VASWO, the business manager group. And so we meet occasionally. Right now we're meeting monthly or more to go over any issues with the UCOA, and an issue like that would be brought up maybe to us, and we run it by that committee to come up with a solution that works for the state and the LPAs.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're back.
Yeah, so this is kind of a slide talking about the experience of the rollout of e-finance. So in 5 short bullet points, e-finance, the implementation was planned for staggered rounds beginning in 2018. And districts were asked to volunteer for which round they preferred. Many districts opted for later rounds. So I think there was already sort of the beginning of some hesitancy to jump right into it. The initial rounds experienced some frustration. Well, with any conversion, right? They experienced some frustration with the software and the conversion process, but there might have been a little bit more than normal or more than what they expected. Eventually, there was an increasing general sentiment across districts that productivity losses and other tangible and intangible costs of converting to a system that at best did not demonstrate any significant advantages over their existing systems outweighed any data reporting benefits at the state level, particularly given that the adoption of the UCOA would provide the bulk of those benefits with or without SSD. So that's kind of where it got to. So a path forward committee of business managers and AOE representatives was formed to propose policy options, ultimately requesting that SSDMS be made voluntary instead of mandatory. Districts focused instead on the implementation of UCOA without e-finance in their existing systems. So 22 and 23. And then mandatory implementation was rescinded by the legislature in 2023.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the path forward group that Ted mentioned, in the end, a legislative report was prepared and it's on the website. So you could search SSDDMS for that report. It was submitted by our secretary at the time and Agency of Digital Services. That kind of drove our opinion of having it forward.
I'll wait with my question because I bet you're going to get there.
So the next slide, current state, out of about 54 SUSDs in Vermont, 21 ultimately converted to e-finance, 2 dropped off when it was made non-mandatory. So we have 19 districts on e-finance now, so about 40% of the districts. In terms of the Uniform Chart of Accounts, almost everybody is both recording and reporting using the Uniform Chart of Accounts. There's 2 or 3 districts that are cleaning up and will be completely on the UCOA by July 1st of this year. A note on the usage of UCOA, not all districts or their ERP systems record the UCOA in perfectly identical manners. But when they report data, this is bounty finance data, expenditure and revenue data to the AOE, data goes through a pretty straightforward crosswalking process. So the ultimate result is that we get 100% uniform and consistent data on our end. And it's fairly painless, the crosswalk process. And I mean, if somebody is already on the UCOA, the crosswalk is just 1-to-1. It's just straight across. It just checks for business rule violations or code violations that they're not right. So there's a little bit of a lift for non-finance districts to get the data to us, but it's really not so bad. Benefits. So in terms of kind of circling back to the original goals of SSDMS, the current benefits. In 2020, I was hired as a dedicated SSDMS subject matter specialist within the AOE that helped with the implementation of e-finance. I no longer have that role, but I'm still kind of the manager of the e-finance contract, and I work with the districts when they have e-finance problems. Because the contract with Power School is a single contract with the AOE, so there's a single point of contact between the AOE and the vendor instead of having multiple contracts across the state. The e-finance users formed a formal governance group that did things like identifying system enhancements, requests to the vendor, or sharing and dissemination of best practices. And that's been a useful thing. And that was part of the SSDMS project. But of course, any vendor user group could do that. People that aren't using e-finance could do something like that if they haven't. We do have central management of the Uniform Chart of Accounts so that we centrally at the AOE can control which codes show up within their systems. That's not the same as being a system admin where a person would have complete control over every part of every feature within the software. It's strictly just the Uniform Chart of Accounts. And then the system that we use to collect data on the back end is called the ODS, an operational data store, where we have access to their data in real time, and we use that to collect expenditure and revenue data. And then the vendor does group trainings when necessary for like calendar year end or fiscal year end for the software users, e-finance users. There are still remaining challenges with the whole program and the consequences. AOE now deals with a split data collection landscape. 40% use e-finance, 60% don't. So we have basically 2 different and separate channels for collecting data. And so there's complications of time time resources used on that. Even with a single system, e-finance, there are still variations in the ways that users implement and utilize the different e-finance features and modules, which can present difficulties when the AOE is collecting data. For example, if you write a query on the back end through that ODS system to collect data, you have to maybe write multiple queries to collect the data because different districts are using the data differently. So it's not quite that simple and straightforward. Because multiple users are on the same system and the contract is managed centrally at the AOE, there are democratic decision-making issues when there are decisions that need to come up, like contract extensions, things like that, or lobbying for legislation for different things. There's ongoing technical issues with the vendor about the ODS system. There have been for 5 or 6 years. And that PowerSchool support response times are not always as fast as they could be, but again, that could be true with any vendor. Ad hoc ODS queries require a trained professional because the system is not user friendly. And so you have to learn the system. And if you don't want to do it in-house, you have to pay the vendor to build queries for you. And since that system has become voluntary for Vermont users, we kind of have reduced. At the beginning, they favored the state of Vermont contract and worked with us very closely. And as time has gone by, we don't have quite as much pull with the vendor. And if we ask for an enhancement request, they don't just give it to us. They say, well, wait in line, here. So future states, potentially with any sort of SSDMS program, there does remain significant support in the field for the theoretical concept of a statewide school system. And there are certainly lessons learned that should be applied to any such efforts. Any sort of systems, conversions, identification, procurements require long lead times and implementation periods. So it's not something that happens overnight by any means. The PowerSchool e-finance, on that note, contract expires in 2 years. We got a 2-year extension that ends in 2 years. And so we will need to decide what to do as a state with e-finance. And any sort of future planning should align with current education reform proposals related to governance issues. And that is the extent of what I'd say about e-finance. Yeah, and then Jen can talk about student information systems.
Okay, I have some questions. Just curious, you were talking about lessons learned, and you mentioned back at the beginning that when PowerSchool or e-finance was originally chosen, there was a narrow group of bidders. And I was curious to know if was that our problem, or is that because there aren't that many companies that offer these products?
More of the latter. Sean could probably speak to that better.
Yeah, in Vermont, there's only, 3 or 4 vendors who service districts, for their ERPs. And, I think we actually got 4 bids. One of them wouldn't sign some required documents. We didn't get to see that one. And then the 3 that did come through, we reviewed them, AOE team, ADS team, and people from the field, scored them in e-finance. Came out ahead. It was really close, but so.
And that would have been early days of ADS too, right? I'm feeling like that gets back to the very early days of ADS when you guys would have been doing that work.
Right. Yeah, I may have said ADS. It may have been people in our agency who were program project managers, and at that time I can't remember when the switch actually happened. But
That was one question. Secretary Saunders?
I was just going to ask the team to really expand on some of those lessons learned when you think about really defining kind of the user requirements at the state level and the district level, some of the things we learned and really thinking about cost within the product to make sure it's really fully meeting the needs of both entities.
Yeah, it's like to your point, I made a little list of lessons learned. Unfortunately, I didn't put them in the slide deck, but obviously, you need to be users. Users are going to be in the field, or they're going to be the ones that are actually using the software. So their participation is very important. And there needs to be actually a product that they would be okay with that's out there, so like the system that they currently work with, most of them enjoy. Mostly it is a good system, but it's also the one that they have, and so they don't need to convert. So, and they were one of the bidders. But you need to, if you're going to go with an RFP process, you need to have some confidence that there is actually a product out there that you would be willing to take. Because if you do an RFP and you get 7 bids, but all are inferior products that you wouldn't ever want to use, then the process didn't do much for you. So you need to research the offerings in the industry as to what softwares are available. So that was one of the, so again, like there was 3, I think there was 3 realistic bidders in the end, and one of them didn't offer the central management system that we wanted. So that kind of nullified their bid to some extent. So there was one bidder that stood out at the end, which isn't a lot to choose from,
Yeah.
Yeah. Other lessons learned, definitely get user buy-in. There was 2 big entities that were looking at this process, the state and their needs, and then the districts and what their needs were. And so one of the slides talked about the benefits of collecting data at the state level, having a common system, but you also need to think about 54 separate SUSDs that are going to be using the system, and is it going to work for them and their needs? And when you multiply all the costs, if they have to hire new people to learn the system and get up to speed, that's a lot of resources and time and money being spent on the system. And there needs to be some benefits, some payback for all that effort, So advanced user buy-in, advanced planning, researching the vendors, getting references from other users would be very important, before you move ahead with something, because it's kind of like e-finance, nobody had used it. So it's kind of like buying a brand new car online. You can see the pictures of it, but you don't ever actually get to test drive it. And then you purchase it and then you get it. What you thought you saw online doesn't match with the reality of what you had when you finally get it delivered. So that's a difficult undertaking. The contracts that get written with the vendor need to be like ironclad so that there's no surprises. Everything is specified in advance. There's no unintended ambiguities with contract. We've had a couple of those with Power School. And cost. I mean, again, if there's a lot of costs, tangible costs in the field in terms of transitioning to a new system, those have to be weighed in terms of the benefits on the other side. That the state might be getting. You can't ignore. So be prepared to, if you're going to do another RFP process, you don't just automatically go with the lowest bidder, because you might be, you need to look at the value that you're getting for those dollars, and it might be worth it to go with the highest bidder if the system is better.
I remember, Rep Southworth and then Campbell.
What was the total cost of this project?
We did compile it once. I couldn't give you a number off the top of my head.
Just thinking back at the bids, I think the one we chose was around 5 million, and it was for 5 years. The higher one was twice that. There was a lower one, but
So the contract's been extended.
we've extended it. We've actually added money to it for additional services. I don't think quite $2 million, but 1 point something.
That was to build in what additional customization.
Training, more support in the field, because, and they continue to draw on that.
Thank you.
Rep Campbell?
Yeah, so I heard from districts in my area, some horror stories about using this stuff. And I think you were diplomatic in your description of how people felt about it. So I guess it makes me wonder why we extended the contract.
Yeah, well, for the ones who, not everybody has a hard time with it, so and for anyone who is now on it, even if, they can move to it, their district has to put the bill back. Right now, the economy covers, anyone that's on it covers the maintenance of it. So
it's basically for the districts that are using it.
yes,
It's a bridge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For those 40% that are using it, they're able to continue while we evaluate what the next step should be. and there are some decisions that will need to be made.
Okay, so are you gonna talk about that and your slide deck up right now, but are you gonna get into that? So how is this gonna, it seems like this is the time to be
Mhm.
putting together another RFP and
Right.
I
So
also noticed in the Power School website that they've been bought by a private equity firm, and that almost makes me nervous.
yeah, I think we have to work with ADS at this point to come up with requirements and do another RFP process, which is always, part of the deal with state contracts. I don't think they're gonna let us extend again, so we will I think start working on that soon.
And I would say that Power School has come a long way. The system had not been updated at all for like 7 years or something when Power School bought it right before we contracted with Power School. So it was kind of a stale product. And largely due to a lot of the feedback from Vermont users, Power School has done a lot of improvements to the software. And I think that probably most users in Vermont using eFinance now are getting along just fine with the system and even appreciate it. Some of them, it's not all of them, but it's a better software today than it was 7 years ago.
Good to also, yes, the first lesson we learned that you mentioned was not improving users sufficiently in the process.
Right.
I sure hope we take that to heart.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Thanks.
That's really articulate those user requirements and needs. That's absolutely going to be critical.
Yeah.
Having had this experience and identifying some of the pain
Yeah.
that some districts have experienced, and those that have kind of stuck with it through the process, it's also be helpful to get their perspective as well in terms of those benefits.
I had a couple more questions before we move on from Power School. One, it is interesting that the difficulty, the slide with all the stops and starts at the legislative level brought back a lot of memories for me. Yeah, just because I remember, all the testimony and sort of agonizing almost about what to do, because at one point I remember this vividly, Rep. Southworth. I remember we were $8 million into it. I don't know why that number stuck in my head, but I think it's correct. And it was like that decision to pull the plug it's a tough one, even when it seems obvious. And that slide was very illustrative.
You're an education committee, weren't you?
I was on education committee during all of that. And, the votes to delay and the votes to delay and pause, and finally the vote to no longer make it mandatory, that basically encompassed my 4 years on the education committee. We were doing other things too. But, one thing I wanted to ask about, two more things that I don't understand. I think this has to do with the ODS, but I remember one benefit of having everybody on the same software was the ability to both push data and pull data. And can you remind me of what that means? Can we do it now? Can we only do it with folks who are on eFinance? How would that help?
So pulling data like from the back end, we can only do with eFinance because we do have access to the ODS system, which is just a huge collection of all their data in real time. So I can write queries and pull whatever data that I want. But the problem again is that each of those districts might be coding some, not the chart of accounts, but coding other things like payroll system, formulas. They're all different. So if I write a query, I get a bunch of data that doesn't make sense because each district might be slightly different than the other. So you can't make sense of it. So we can pull data for real basic things, like just all the expenditures. That one's not so hard. We can pull that data or revenues. So that's pulling data, and then pushing data. We have control of the chart of accounts. So if they wanted to code something with program 96 and they tried it, it wouldn't work. They'd get an error message saying that code doesn't exist because we control which codes exist and what don't exist.
Okay.
And there's some business rules, like if you use a combination of two different codes that don't work, they'll get a business rule violation that says you can't put those two codes together.
Okay, so if I'm sitting using eFinance, I can't be like, I'm going to create a new code, 132.
Right, but that's only the chart of accounts. So I was thinking today on the way in, actually, because I used to be the system administrator in Hardwick for the Power School SIS program. And as a system administrator, you have control over every aspect of the software and how your users interface with the software. So you can control every feature, every module within the software and how users interface with that. We don't have that system. We're not the system admin. We just control the chart of accounts. Every other aspect of the software is under control of the districts, which is why you see each district kind of doing things in a different way from their neighbors. So that presents some difficulties. So
Okay.
that could be one of the lessons learned. That if you had a statewide system, you might want to have the state be the system admin. You'd have to have a dedicated person for people to do that because it's a lot of work.
Okay. And then finally, this is my last question about Power School. The data breach. Can you guys provide any kind of update on the Power School refinance data breach? It sounded like some of our districts were maybe impacted.
I don't think it was EFI. I think it was the.
It was the SII.
It was related to the student information system,
And
to
we're going,
e-finance.
we're going there next.
But Jen, we may want to also reach out to Lisa Helm if she's available, if you'd like her to provide any additional context. So she's been able to support the districts with that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious to know the extent of it. And I hadn't seen any follow-up reporting since I read about it.
And we can share too the information we provided to the field as a follow-up to you.
That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, it's Brett Bailey.
So what was the issue on the supervisor districts didn't want to do this? Was it the cost factor that the district had to pay to buy the equipment, or a uniform chart of accounts seems like it ought to be pretty straightforward, but they,
No, they were for the uniform chart of accounts, 100%. Nobody had any problem with that. And actually, like I mentioned, the Vasco group did vote unanimously to adopt an SSDMS system. There could have been some misunderstandings whether it was optional or mandatory, but they were all for it in concept. It was how it played out in reality and the software that was chosen and how it was rolled out that started to get funky.
The system adoption.
Yeah.
Jen, you're being queued up, I believe.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to send a note to Lisa real quick to ask her the answer to that question, so I apologize. Get back to here. So shared SIS, a statewide student information system. So currently, the state has adopted the EdFi data standard to collect information from different state information systems that are used across the state. There are 4 systems in use throughout the state. Power School is by far, I think, the most used one, but there are 4 different ones. And what EdFi does is it hooks up to any different SIS and pulls the data down and then normalizes it. So, for example, if one district enters male, female as 1 for male, 2 for female, and another enters it as M or F, EdFi will normalize that into the data so that we can have everything the same when we collect it. And so it's agnostic with regards to which SIS a district chooses to use. We can match up with anyone. We just have to map the data from their system to our system, which we completed in the last year as we've newly adopted EdFi. So that came out of a process, I think it happened about 6 years ago. It was before my time, but I believe it was around 2019 when AOE was exploring adopting a statewide SIS. There was a work group that was convened consisting of the local education agencies. I believe it was superintendents, data managers, and business managers. Anyone who wanted to join was welcome to join. And the group met several times and reviewed the options, which were essentially keep the status quo, adopt a statewide student information system, or move to something like EdFi, which would allow allow districts to use whatever SIS they wanted and AOE to collect and standardize the data. And that was the choice of the group. And so we adopted EdFi. We've spent the last 2 years bringing it on. We did a pilot year, and then we did a concurrent year with the previous data system and the current data system, and now we have moved to full EdFi implementation. Objections to a statewide SIS, as I've been told, were cost to maintain the system and how those were going to be paid, but more so, it was the cost and the staff time needed to switch to a new SIS. That was really the local education agency's biggest concern, is what it would take in terms of manpower, time, money to make the move. So that's what I know about the statewide SIS exploration and how we ended up where we are today. And I think our last slide is literally just our contact information if you'd like to contact us. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the statewide SIS.
Questions about that? Yeah, Rep. Campbell.
Yeah, so Ed5, can you talk, what is Ed5? It's I guess a program or whatever, a product of some other company? Where does that come from?
It is a product of a company called Ed Analytics, and it is an API, and I am currently completely blanking on what API stands for. Can you?
Application
Yeah.
plugin.
Application programming interface.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes. So essentially, like as an interface, like I said, it's like a vacuum cleaner that hooks up and sucks the data down,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then normalizes it. So
So Ed Analytics is the name of the company again?
yes.
Okay, thanks.
I think it's like a nonprofit consortium or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And Jen, could you expand on just the range of data points that are collected and also some of the efficiency measures that we've evaluated in terms of timing and reporting?
Sure. So it's a very wide range. We started with our basic and most important data collections, which is like our end of year data collection and our beginning of the year data collection, which is enrollment, student demographics, staff data, all of that type of stuff. And now we're expanding and we'll continue to move forward over the next couple of years. We're adding in our special education data is going to be pulled into the system. We will eventually have other data collections that are currently separate and were separate from our other systems will be pulled in, and it will all move to EdFi. So that will bring a lot of efficiency, as Ted was talking about. When you have things in different systems and different collections, and then you have to merge and match to be able to do data analysis, that can be very time consuming. It also has the potential to introduce error. So having it all in one system will make things much smoother for everyone. We've also been able to show districts in real time data quality issues and return dashboards to them so that they can look at what they have, whereas our old system you had to stop and not allow any more data entry. To be able to do that, now we can just have a constant back and forth with the LEAs on the quality of their data and what's being entered, which has helped to speed up our processes a bit. I think I covered it all. Did I miss one of the points you wanted me to make, Zoe?
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Rep. Morrow?
Can you elaborate on where we are, where you are with ADS? How many people do you have embedded with you, if any? What your relationship with ADS is? Any ongoing current projects with them? Anything under that category?
I think to give you a complete answer, we'll need to put all of that together because we are coordinating with ADS on a range of projects that we'd be happy to report out. But we do have a dedicated liaison on our team, and then I think 2 FTEs that are assigned for ADS. We've also, through some grant funding, been able to bring on additional resource for one of our systems for child nutrition specifically. But as a follow-up, we can provide the different projects that we're currently working on with ADS.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can speak to that a little bit.
Expand on, yeah. Thank you.
You want me to expand on that?
Yes, please.
Sure. Okay. I didn't hear. I meet with our ADS representative weekly, and she also sends out a very long list of all the different projects that she's working on. So I'm mostly familiar with the ones that involve DMAT, and I know of 4 or 5 different people that work with DMAT on a regular basis. That's the Data Management and Analysis Division that I manage. So I'm in very close contact with Tracy Delphia, who's our representative, and we're working together daily almost on various projects. So I feel it's a pretty close relationship, at least for Tracy and I, on the work that we have together.
And Jen, I know we'll follow up with kind of the list of projects, but if you can give a range of the projects, like some of the work around assessment, this snapshot, and some of the licensing.
Yes, so they're working with us on, as Zoe said, the snapshot, which is our state report card. They work with us every year when we go to publish that. We are currently working on some needed improvements to our data infrastructure to be able to be more efficient and effective and working towards higher data quality. And then I could pull up the list that she has of
Enrollment system, there's a couple other systems that we're working on in terms of adopting to promote some efficiencies and working with the field. We just wanted to have a sense of the range of those projects, but we'll follow up with a detailed list.
That'd be helpful. Thanks. Yeah, send it to the committee and we'll post it as follow-up testimony. Yeah. Yeah, Rebecca.
So the ones, how are you getting on the e-finance, the ones that aren't in your system? How do you get that, all that information to your department so that you get all these numbers? Is that all manual Excel work?
The people that are not on eFinance,
Right.
They copy their accounting system data into a spreadsheet that we provide for them. And then that spreadsheet has some spreadsheet magic that crosswalks their data to our system of codes, the Uniform Chart of Accounts, and they should be 99% close to begin with anyway. And then we push a button and it compiles all the different districts together in one big file. So it's pretty straightforward.
But you have to do that at your department.
Yes.
So they send it to you and
It's a low tech solution.
Victoria?
So for the data that you have to provide the U.S. Department of Education, is that funded by federal dollars, all the costs involved in the software to do that?
There's a couple of reports. One, the state level report, we just log into a web form, import or type in the state level information. The school district level information, we send them a pretty raw Excel file once we've compiled it in SQL and produced it. So I guess SQL would be what we use most to turn the data, and that's I don't think it's I don't know if we paid licenses for it for an SLA with Hedi. I don't think we use federal funds for it.
Taking a bit of a turn before we let you all go, for Secretary Saunders, I can't not ask how you think Vermont will be impacted or whether we'll be impacted by all the layoffs and stuff at the federal level. It's scary.
Yeah, so we'll have a greater understanding, maybe as soon as today, but certainly in a couple of weeks in terms of what is passed and what the impact will be. We're closely monitoring that situation. We actually, Ann Bortonaro and our team provided a thorough report yesterday. I can share that as a follow-up with this committee so that you have an understanding of what we're watching and anticipating. There are still a lot of unknowns around what it means to operationalize putting more control in the hands of the state and how that would impact our set aside. It depends on how those dollars are going to be delivered. If they come in one block grant, and that gives us a lot of different flexibility, or how that's going to be distributed is a big question in terms of us evaluating what that impact will be on us at a state. So there are a lot of unknowns. In terms of specific, programmatic cuts, anticipated. There's some conversations at USDA that they're taking up in terms of adjusting the threshold for the qualification for free and reduced meals, which will impact, poverty levels and can impact participation in other programs. So that is one that we are looking at. Our education funding is budget forward. So the impacts that would be impacted should there be cuts would be expected 2 years. And I'll lay that out we have that laid out in our testimony yesterday with more detail that I'll provide as a follow-up. We've also been sharing this information through our superintendent's update that I send weekly, and identifying, any sort of updates we've heard from the federal government and our analysis of it to date. We did receive feedback actually through Ann's testimony yesterday that may not be getting out as widely as it needs to. And so we are working to provide a clearer space on our website to provide those updates. But we have been communicating pretty much on a weekly basis
Sure.
to get those updates.
Thank you. All right. Any further questions for AOE? All right, we can go on live. Thank you so much.